You are standing in a windowless room in Langley, Virginia. The air is recycled, smelling of burnt coffee and ozone. Before you is a wall covered in grainy satellite captures and a single low-resolution photograph of a man with dark, empty eyes. This is Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. To the world, he is El Mencho, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. To the government, he is a $15 million bounty. To you, he is the ghost you've been chasing for 12 years. You've watched him evolve from a kid picking avocados in Michoacan into a monster who built a machine that turned white poison into a global empire. You've seen him shoot down military helicopters and turn cities into charcoal. Your colleagues call you the ghost hunter. You have no social media, and your phone is a modified encrypted device that doesn't officially exist. You've sacrificed your sleep and your sanity to find a single crack in his armor. On February 22nd, 2026, that crack finally widened. You aren't just an analyst, you are the architect of his downfall. You've spent decades studying the ballistic miracles and the professional satisfaction of high-stakes operations. Today, the hunt ends. The origin of the monster. To catch a man like Mencho, you have to understand the soil he grew out of. You've memorized his file until the pages are soft. He was born on July 17, 1966, in the Tierra Caliente region of Michoacan, hot country. He was one of 6 brothers in a family that grew avocados. He dropped out of primary school in the 5th grade to work the fields. By 14, he wasn't guarding fruit. He was guarding marijuana plantations for local growers. You've analyzed his move to California in the 1980s. He settled in the San Francisco Bay Area, cycling through fake names like Ruben Avila and Jose Lopez Prieto. He wasn't a kingpin then. He was a hustler, a young man trying to survive in a country that didn't want him there. In 1992, the law caught up with him at a bar called the Imperial in San Francisco. He was the lookout while his brother Abraham tried to sell 5 ounces of heroin to undercover cops. This is the moment you realized he was different. Mencho was sharp enough to smell the setup. He noticed the bills were too neatly stacked and warned his brother through a wiretapped conversation never to deal with those men again. When they were caught, Mencho took a plea deal, 5 years in a Texas prison, just to ensure his brother wouldn't get a life sentence. That was the first sign of his discipline. He wasn't flashy like El Chapo. He didn't seek attention. He sought control. After deportation, he did the unthinkable. He became a cop in Jalisco. This is why your task is so hard. He knows how you think because he used to wear the uniform. He understands the rules of engagement and how they can be exploited. He transitioned from cop to hitman for the Milenio Cartel, eventually marrying Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia. It wasn't just a marriage. It was a merger of a man with no lineage into one of the most powerful criminal bloodlines in Mexico. The sniper's patience. To catch him, you had to build a team that could match his brutality with precision. You spent months at a training facility in North Carolina, overseeing the selection of a specialized Mexican Special Forces unit. You watched them through the candidate phase where the attrition rate is 70%. You saw them low crawl through mud, building ghillie suits from burlap and local vegetation, transforming themselves into something that doesn't look human. You taught them that the sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, it's patience. You explained that precision shooting at 1,000 yards is a discipline where wind doesn't just push the bullet, it curves it in patterns that change second by second. Gravity drops the round in parabos that require calculation, not estimation. You looked for the psychology that doesn't break, the soldiers whose minds quiet under pressure. You also managed the human variables. You had an informant, an ordinary citizen who ratted out the supreme leader. You put him in a witness protection program, destroying his phone numbers and wiping his schedule off the earth. You watched the psychological torture of his 7 days of isolation. You saw how the cartel's army of hackers used a 15-second video from a nosy neighbor to track the informant's family. The cartel didn't just use bullets, they used advanced digital editing to create perfect lies. They sent the informant videos of his family being beaten, videos that were fakes designed to lure him out of hiding. You learned that Mencho's organization wasn't just a gang. It was a sprawling network with regional commanders and financial infrastructure. They were special forces operators in their own right, trained to show no emotion and exhibit no weakness. The Noose Tightens. By 2026, the pressure was absolute. The government gave the military broader authority to pursue cartel leadership. You were receiving complementary intelligence, a mix of signals and human assets. You knew Mencho was hiding in the rural Sierras, guarded by mercenaries with former military training. But you also knew he was sick. Reports of kidney disease had been surfacing for years. He had built a secret hospital in the village of El Alcihuatl just to stay alive. A man who builds a hospital in the jungle is a man terrified of dying. You leveraged that fear. You monitored the logistics of his medical supplies. You watched the mountain town of Tapalpa, a heart of CJNG territory. On Sunday morning, February 22nd, the operation was greenlit. You sat in a command center, listening to the rhythmic breathing of your team. You watched the thermal feeds as the special forces met armed resistance. The radio exploded with the incessant rattling of heavy caliber bullets. You heard the massive explosions of rocket launchers. Through the dark slits of your monitors, you witnessed the ballistic miracle. A cartel hitman, disguised as a street vendor, pulled a gun hidden in a bouquet of flowers. He opened fire on your lead operator, but a sniper you trained, stationed on a nearby roof, saw the anomaly. In a fraction of a second, the hitman's head popped like a melon under the sun. They reached the target. Mencho wasn't the big boss from the banners. He was a 59-year-old man, wounded and bleeding from a gunshot to the abdomen. "We have the primary," the voice crackled through your headset. You felt a surge of professional satisfaction, the same emotion you'd feel after any job done correctly. But that satisfaction was short-lived. The country in flames. They loaded him onto a military helicopter for transfer to Mexico City. You were on that flight. You sat across from him as the helicopter's engine roared, a metal grinder of noise. He didn't yell. He didn't make violent gestures. He simply stared at you with those dark, empty eyes. That silent stare was more terrifying than 1,000 death threats. It made you feel like a cornered animal. You looked out the narrow steel slit of the helicopter window. Below you, the country was already beginning to burn. Within hours of the capture, the cartel launched coordinated chaos. Gunmen torched vehicles and blocked highways in nearly a dozen states. Guadalajara went dark. You saw walls of fire created by dozens of burned vehicles. In Puerto Vallarta, smoke rose over the skyline. Tourists were sprinting through airports as urban terrorism took hold. On the walls of buildings, messages were scrawled in red, messages claiming that all this tragedy was your fault. You saw small children crying, separated from their parents by the mass hysteria. A crushing weight fell on your chest. You realized that your act of justice had pushed thousands of innocent people into a terrifying nightmare. The guilt began to destroy your soul. You wondered if doing the right thing was really worth such a macabre and bloody price. Halfway to the capital, the monitor flatlined. The medics moved in, but Mencho was gone. He died on a floor of corrugated steel, somewhere between the mountains of Jalisco and a hospital he'd never reach. The most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere was dead, and he had left a sea of fire in his wake. The machine never stops. You returned to Langley, but the victory felt like swallowing crushed glass. The news was flooded with images of the terrorist attacks. You read the comments online. People weren't calling you a hero. They were writing, "If the damn agents had kept quiet, no one would have died." They claimed you were the real villain in this nightmare. Your supervisor sat across from you. He saw your pale face and eyes full of despair. He asked you point blank if you thought this was your fault. He told you that criminals always want you to believe the consequences are caused by you, that it's their way of playing mind games. He said, "If a man with a knife threatens the whole neighborhood, the person who calls the cops is not the cause of him stabbing someone. He himself is the cause." He told you that to save a rotting body, you have to amputate the infection. But you know the truth is more complicated. El Mencho is dead, his son is in a U.S. prison, his daughter is in a U.S. prison, and his wife is incarcerated. The immediate line of succession is empty. But the CJNG is not a small operation that collapses when the boss dies. It's a sprawling network. The roots shift, but the machine keeps running. The poverty, the corruption, and the demand for the product didn't die on that helicopter. You've spent 22 years in this world, and you've shaped a generation of shooters who are now shaping the next. You carry the faces of the collateral damage, the dead civilians who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. You put your case files in a closet that you don't open very often. You try to construct a civilian surface, but you can't unknow what you know. You dream of the shots you didn't take and the targets that moved before the decision resolved. Somewhere in Michoacan right now, a kid is standing in an avocado field, looking at the same mountains Mencho once did. He is deciding whether to stay or to cross. The game hasn't changed. It just lost a player. You did what your country asked. You did it better than most. But as you look at the new photo on the wall, the next regional commander vying for control, you realize the cycle is already beginning again. If this story made you think about the price of justice, drop a comment below. Subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of the intelligence world. See you in the next one.